Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of foreign-born politicians, foreign-born people, activists being elected to or appointed to office in Western countries. Now, if we look at, say, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, you look at the guy who's odds on to become the Mayor of New York and other cities. And I look around Australia, the mayors of a lot of cities and regions and places around Australia, including federal and state parliaments. And we've got a situation all across the West where people from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Africa, and third world countries generally, or even the countries of southeastern Europe and so on, they don't see their role as acting on behalf of the electorate. They see their role as acting on behalf of their tribe and their racial diaspora, and making sure that their racial diaspora gets lots of goodies and from this never-ending bottomless pit of cash and handouts that they see. And that's the only reason they come to Western countries, to get these handouts and to take this endless amount of money from the money tree. They've got no concept of how wealth is created. They've got no concept of democracy, how it's supposed to work, the rule of law, due legal process. They can't even comprehend it. So they come to the West, and they come from dirt poor, impoverished, corrupt, basket case, shithole countries, and they see how well run and organized, by comparison, how well run and organized and streamlined and so on the West is, and they just assume, well, that's it. You've got so much. You have so much here. We have to make sure. We have to force you to share it with us, and the outcomes must be equal. This is very much their view, and they see there's nothing wrong with that view. The fact that they haven't created any of this wealth or contributed to it, and they just parasites en masse, that they don't see it that way. They say by reverse, well, we would share what we have with you. Well, that's fine, but you don't have anything. You've got nothing we want. You've got nothing to share. So that doesn't really work. But I just want to talk about what's to be done here. That 25 plus years ago, I was having a conversation with some political advisors in Australia, and talking about, because the mass migration was really just in the very early stages there, but already the political parties were trying to find people from the Chinese or Indian diaspora or wherever, to give them, to gift them, to give them as a gift, give them political office. So, hey, then we can get the votes from that area. And so they would use it cynically for supposed democratic purposes. But I said, what about, so I raised the issue, what about people getting elected to office that don't represent the people, and that they just represent their diaspora? Well, that can never happen. Back in the day, remember this is 25 plus years ago, back in the day, these political advisors, well, that can never happen, because there'll never be enough Indians or Chinese here to swing the vote one way or another. There'll never be a big enough voting bloc where they can affect outcomes. So we control what happens. If we're going to appoint an Indian or a Chinese person to political office, we choose them. We make them. It's like manufacturing a Hollywood star or something. We do that. We control all those processes. Because there'll never be enough Indian or Chinese or whatever voters to swing it one way or another. Now that's changed, so that if you look at London now, London is 37% white British. New York is 47, 48% white American. So there's a situation now where there are so many non-white people from third world basket case shithole countries who are determined not to vote. If they're given an option of voting for a brown or a black candidate, they'll do it, just to not vote for a white guy. Now, they think this is going to give them more handouts and more benefits. The people people who are non-white from these third world countries talk very much with a socialist communist message. We'll force those white people to share it with us. We'll make them do it, and we'll throw them motherfuckers in prison if they don't, and so on. So this is, the police are there just as a device, a machine for white people using to oppress us. So when we go around on murdering sprees, they want to arrest us and put us in prison. The outrage of it. So this is very much a situation now. The dynamics have changed so that, I remember in one conversation, somebody who barely speaks English, talking in broken English with Chinese, they're never going to get elected to anything in Australia, ever. So we've got nothing to worry about. But that's all changed now because the mass migration has given these people a voting bloc that can swing elections. And if you look at the amounts of people in federal parliament or state parliament or even regional, council, city assemblies and this sort of thing, there's large numbers now of people who are getting voted in by the large migrant bloc of voters. So, and in some councils in Australia and elsewhere around the world, there's no white people at all on the council. And this is in the Western world. So this is a very serious matter. Now it's bad enough today, let alone, but in 25 to 30 years' time, if the current trends continue, which they may not, but if they do, the majority of councils, city councils in Australia will be all non-white. State or regional parliaments will be majority non-white, and the federal parliament will be probably 40 to 45% non-white, given current trends. Now, this is these people don't understand democracy as it was created by homogenous people who agree to live by a set of rules. They've got no, again, as I mentioned earlier, they've got no concept of this. So to them, the only purpose of holding political office is to plunder the treasury. That's their only concept of how it works. That they have, that's why you have power, to plunder the white treasury to give to your black and brown buddies. And they see no problem with that. Well, why wouldn't we do it? Look how much you have. You have so much. And we'll force you, we'll make you share it with us. We'll kill you if you want, and so on. So that's where we're heading. Now, how do you stop that? Because the concept of migration was twofold in relation to the possibility of holding political office. One was that the migration numbers were very small. Two, they would come from other Western countries who shared the same, more or less the same values in terms of rule of law, due legal process, democracy, voting, homogeneity, that sort of thing. So it didn't matter if somebody, so if a white Christian guy came from Holland or Belgium or Germany or Denmark or something, it didn't matter, Britain. They would come to Australia and they would assimilate, but they share pretty much all the values. They're white Christian from democratic, capitalist, rule of law, due legal process society. So they slotted in very quickly. If the children who came here were under 10 years old or under, they would be fully Australian within their own lifetime, even if the language was different. So, as in if they come from Holland or something. Now, that's all changed. Firstly, the people that are coming are not from other Western, democratic rule of law, English-speaking countries or whatever. They're Christian. They're not. They're quite different, and they behave and act and think very differently. Their aspirations are very different. They've got no intention of integrating or becoming white. They believe themselves to be, spiritually and culturally superior. Just Indians almost to a man, and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. They believe that, why would I integrate with an inferior culture? Why would I integrate with a culture of inferior spirituality? And so, cool, why I wouldn't do that, and I'm not going to. So that's their view. And so political power is, again, to them, simply a road or a device to go and plunder the white treasury in the rich white country. Now, the next sort of aspect was that no one considered there would be, if some guy gets up to, I want you to come and vote for me, he's got no hope if all the voters are white. But if most of the voters are Indian, then the guy's looking pretty good. And that's the way it is now. There are certain parts of Australia where they've been just taken over by Indians, and they insist on having political representation in order to make sure they get access, front seat access, front row access to all the goodies in the Treasury. Now, the idea that they would represent all the people or all of the Australians is ludicrous to them. They can't even comprehend that mentality. What you mean? I'm going to impartially represent everyone? No, of course I'm not. I'm here to represent my tribe and my racial diaspora, and they're unashamed about that. So how do we prevent it? How do we stop that? How do we make sure that only people that represent, in terms of Parliament, all the people? So it's very important that they represent the electorate sort of, they're there to serve the people in the electorate. Now, there are plenty of white people who've got a problem with that now that are sitting in Parliament. They represent the globalists, not the voters that supposedly put them there. But just on the issue of mass migration and racial tribalism and all this sort of thing, it was okay to say, well, if you're born in the country or if you're you can gain political office, then that's okay. You can hold political. If you stand to be elected and people vote for you, what's wrong with that? That's okay. But that assumed a homogenous white society would do the voting. That's not the case anymore. So the ground rules are completely changed. And what it means is that in many places, 30, 40, 50, 60% of the population are determined to vote for any non-white candidate that stands for office. And this is what we're seeing in New York and, of course, in London and many other cities around. So this idea of anyone can stand for office, and if they get elected, well done, or the president has to be born in the United States. So that covers off that. That's not enough anymore. The first and even second generation born from foreign parents as anti-American, as anti-Western and anti-white as you could possibly get. So it's going to be and with Indians. I know Indians that are 5, 6, 7 generations Western born that still insist they're Indian and still insist that they're there to get all the benefits they can possibly extract from white society. They refuse to have anything to do with white people, yet insist that it's white people are racist towards them. So looking at this looking at it in the big picture here, right now, today, it urgently needs to be addressed that just being elected to office is no longer, being capable of being elected to office is no longer relevant, because there's such a mass diaspora of foreign people from third world, completely alien countries. They have no concept of democracy. The power is simply a means to plunder the treasury, as far as they're concerned. That's it. So we really need to put in some sort of perspective here that being elected to office is no longer relevant. People that can speak in serious broken English are getting elected to office, not because they're being actually voted in, but because the diaspora, the racial diaspora is so. You look at there are many politicians in the United States that go around their electorate speaking in the language of their genetic homeland. They're not speaking English so really now. It needs to. I would argue it needs to be. You have to go back 4 generations where at least one parent from each generation must have been locally born in that Western country, in the United States. By the time it gets to great grandparents, it has to be both parents, and so on, both great grandparents, so that in that way you can very much increase the likelihood that the politician will be fully westernized over multiple generations and will believe that they're representing representing the people at large and not just a racial diaspora. Is that a perfect way of stopping it? No, but this idea of if you get elected or if you're born in the United States is enough. It's not. It needs to go much further now. And if we don't do it in the West, then white people, as they become a minority, which they're on trend to become a minority, then we're going to be treated very badly. The revenge politics will be huge, and it'll be very unpleasant to be a white person in what hitherto were 100% white countries. You've been Tassis today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.